You're listening to the Soul Career Podcast, the podcast that brings you stories from people who've taken a risk to discover careers that fill them with purpose and make them come alive. I'm your host, Lysandra Ricketts. Now for the episode. Today, I'm joined by Mari-Anne Daura, Communications Business Partner for Sustainability at IKEA. Mari-Anne is an American living in Denmark whose job is based in Sweden. I met Mari-Anne when she joined the Soul Career program as a client, and she is one of our amazing success stories. We actually mentioned Mari-Anne in our March podcast episode with Yasmina Zaidman. Mari-Anne is working in social impact, sustainability communications at IKEA. So I'm really happy to have her on the show as a guest. Welcome to the podcast, Mari-Anne.
Hi, Alessandra. Thanks. Happy to be here.
I'm so happy when I get to have former clients on the podcast. That those are like my favorite episodes, actually. So I say that for everyone, but yeah. Okay, so I love all my guests. Okay, so I always like to start with what exactly are you doing now as a communications business partner for sustainability at IKEA?
Yeah. So my role with IKEA is basically I'm here to advise and support the business in its strategic objectives, and those are related to sustainability. And my area specifically is focused on the social impact that we have in different communities and on different groups of people, basically around the world. I work with a team of amazing people who are super, super dedicated, and I'm just there to provide some strategic direction and some basically advice and where I see that we can do things better or in a slightly different way or, that kind of thing, just to make sure that we have the most impact possible.
Okay, so what exactly does that mean though? So does that mean like writing press releases? Does that mean going to the communities that IKEA helps to serve? Like what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, great question. So really what this is so my function is within the global, it's a global function. So I'm not specifically out in the communities, but we work with a lot of different areas. So like looking at our supply chain, for instance, we have some guidelines that we use to make sure that we, don't create negative impact and basically making sure that we can provide decent employment along the way. So it's part of my job is about sort of risk assessment. It's about looking at gaps that we might not have considered or looking at the ways that we communicate, making sure that we come across very clearly or making sure that we are coming across in the best way, sort of like positioning ourselves as the purpose-led brand and company that we really want to be in this world. So a lot of my work is really about advising different functions on some of the communications that they want to put out. And in some cases, it could be advising them to maybe we don't communicate about this just yet because maybe we're not ready. Maybe it might be a great initiative, but we need the proof points to prove what we've actually done. So that we don't come across like we are greenwashing or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's I'm not so much hands-on like feet on the ground soldier, but like sort of like in the background, sort of strategically like looking at our positioning.
Okay, wonderful. So what are some of the comms that have come out that you're particularly proud of, or some of the projects that IKEA is working on in sustainability that you're like really proud that you were a part of that?
We've had well, it's a little bit difficult to say because a lot of the stuff that I'm working on right now, it's stuff that will be coming out. So I don't want to speak too soon because it's not quite public yet. But we're working on a lot of big things. We're looking at our approach to how we actually have an impact in society and on the neighborhoods. So we're looking at different ways. So we're looking at broadly, like how do we provide better homes for people? Making sure that people have adequate housing. We have an initiative called A Place Called Home, where we're working to make sure that people have access to decent homes and spaces that they can call home. Sometimes it's a matter of maybe it's a shelter, making sure that the shelter is adequately furnished and things are up to standard. We also have an initiative where we are working with we're aiming to increase inclusion for refugee populations.
Mm.
So we have an initiative called Skills for Employment, where we work to help integrate refugees into local society. So, like helping to give them local language skills or provide them with skills for employment, either like within IKEA or within some other retail entity. So it's not, we're not guaranteeing them jobs at IKEA, but, providing them the skills to get employed in this kind of work if that's what they are interested in, right?
Yeah.
So that's another area that I'm really super proud of. Along the lines of the refugee thing, we're also working at how we can change the narrative around refugees. And that's sort of like a big, very long-term strategic plan that we're working on, a 3-year plan. So we're fine-tuning that right now. So just watch this space. I can't say too much more on that, but yeah,
No, that
some
was
of
a
the
lot
projects that I'm really
because
excited
I
about.
did not know IKEA was doing all of that. Like, so it's really good to hear because what we heard about on the episode with Yasmina was more the entrepreneurial stuff that IKEA is
Yeah.
doing. So you're telling us about
Mhm.
housing and refugees. That's really, really interesting and really good for us to know corporate philanthropy in action. So, what do you love the most about your job right now?
Um, the thing I love the most is having this opportunity to really contribute to something bigger and broader than myself. I'm somebody who it's really important for me. I can't go to work just for a paycheck. Like I need to know that what I'm doing actually has a bigger impact on humanity and society. And I'm really energized by all of the different projects that I'm working on because it's stuff that I really, really believe in. So um, yeah, I would say that's the thing I love the most.
And that's a great segue into your psychometric results, right? Which I love to talk about on the podcast. Your Myers Briggs is INFJ, which 16personalities.com classifies as the advocate. But people with the NF personality types, like I mentioned in my March podcast episode, NF personality types really are drawn to the social impact space. And you and I are both examples of that, right? I'm an
Yeah.
ENFP, you're an INFJ, both drawn to this space of impact. So you are a former client of Soul Career, and I think we had some part to play in you finding a soul career. So why did you join our program, and what kind of transformation did you experience as a result of it?
It's yeah, that's a great question, and it's a funny story. It's so random how I actually came across Soul Career. It was I was in the process of leaving a previous job, which now looking back I can see was definitely not the right fit for my personality and my motivations. And I was really trying to figure out, okay, what do I want to do next? And I was kind of at a point where I was starting to get burnt out and thinking, okay, corporate life is not for me. Like this is not fulfilling so I was trying to figure out what am I going to do, and I actually went to get like a consultation for to start my own business because I was thinking, okay, maybe I just need to work for myself. So I met this woman who is connected to a former boss of mine, and she was giving out these consultations, and I told her about my background and what my aspirations, and I have this idea of like I want to create this business that has a positive social impact, but I don't know what that is yet. Like I don't know what the product is. And she was like, maybe you need to actually like figure out what it is that motivates you and what you want to do. And she's the one who actually told me about you. I think she met you on a plane somewhere,
Yeah,
something
I
random like
forgot
that.
that this is how you found out about Soul Career. Yeah, no, I met her at a conference, a social impact conference in New York years ago, like
Right.
2014. And she actually lives in Denmark. I don't even think I knew at that time that she lived in Denmark. I came from Jamaica, she came from Denmark, and we met at this conference briefly, just one point in time, connected on LinkedIn. And I guess she saw all the Soul Career posts on LinkedIn. That's so funny.
Yeah, so I think it was just meant to be. That was so random. But yeah, so I reached out to you because I was like, okay, maybe you can help me figure out what it is that I want to do with my life. And yeah, so that's how I got started with the program.
And how were we a part of this incredible journey to where you are now loving this job and social impact at IKEA?
Yeah. Well, there's so many ways that you were able to impact that. I think one of the things is obviously you gave me some sort of like strategic tips in terms of my job search, but I think the thing that really helped me the most was like it was really about a mind shift, like mindset shift. So I was able to look at things differently and figure out because like I said, I came into this thinking maybe corporate life is not for me, right? But here I am working for a corporation and I'm loving it. So it was really about looking at okay, there are companies out there that are doing good things, that are doing big things that, actually positively impact society. I was just blocking myself in how I was looking at the world. So I think, working with you helped me to like open up to different possibilities. I know at some point I started looking at, opening my search to other places, other countries, remote working, for instance, right? Um, and I had gone to school in Sweden. I did a master's in Sweden. So I lived there for a little while. But when I moved to Denmark, I just assumed, I can't work in Sweden. I'm in Denmark now. So like just even that, just like having that mental block thinking, well, that's not a thing. So I didn't really consider IKEA at the time. But you working with you really opened my eyes to, okay, there are other possibilities. Stop those limiting beliefs that you have, and just open up and see what happens. So I think that was really the key thing for me.
Yeah, what I remember, you were part of a group that joined at the height of the pandemic. Like the pandemic was raging, everywhere was in lockdown. You joined, I think, in April of 2020, and then we saw the George Floyd protests in the US. So it was a very tumultuous time, and you had just left your job, and you had a young baby, and you were worried about finding another job, and it was a very tumultuous time. I remember. And what I remember
Yeah.
about you in particular is you were present every day. You went all in, especially in the mindset, the self-discovery part of the program, which I think is the most important. Just getting clarity about what's important to you. Because as you said, you were interested in entrepreneurship. You were very like against corporate at one point, and really just opening your eyes to actually I love impact, and there are places that will allow me to do that while giving me a steady, stable, consistent income and the lifestyle that I need to support my family. So that's what I really remember of that period of tumult, and yet beautiful things came out of that period.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. Yeah, it was a very wow, it was a time, and it was, parts of it were really painful, but that was like a beautiful transformation, and I think it was the starting point of this like transformation for me. There, so like even today, there's things that I'm unlearning, and I'm learning new things about myself. So it was really eye opening at the time.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So that brings me to your journey before all of that. So you are an American living in Denmark, working in Sweden, as I mentioned. You never
Mhm.
thought that, living in Denmark, you thought Sweden was closed off to you, but you're doing that remotely. Tell us about that first, and then I want to go further back into your journey into how you got here. So, what's it like working remotely from Denmark for a company based in Sweden?
Yeah, well, I do work in Sweden. So my office is based in Sweden. So I do travel over to Sweden a few times a week. But I work from home sometimes. But it's a really easy commute. It takes like 45 minutes to get from Copenhagen to my office. So that's not bad. But it was because, like you said, I'm sort of like a citizen of the planet. I've lived in a lot of different places. Like I live in Denmark, but I work in Sweden. So additional there's additional challenges, logistical challenges, but there's a lot of flexibility, which is really great. And I think also the fact that we are in this pandemic, a lot more companies are open to the idea of, yeah, obviously people can work from home. So it's not so much about where you are, but yeah, yeah, I'm doing it. I'm going across. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
a dream of a lot of people. I think European companies, even more so than American ones, are open to hiring globally now coming out of the pandemic. And slowly but surely, the American ones are coming on board too, not just looking at Americans for those jobs, but looking globally because the talent pool is global. And you
Mhm.
self-describe as a global citizen. So tell us that journey. Where were you born? How did you get to where you are today? I want to hear the whole story.
Yeah, my story is one that's not straightforward, but I was born in Zambia, and I grew up in the States. So my parents were studying in the U.S. My dad was doing a PhD, and my mom was doing her master's. So I grew up in the U.S. And then when I was a teenager, we moved from America. We moved to Zambia. So I lived in Zambia for 4 years during high school. Great time to move away from all your friends. But it was now looking back, I mean, it was obviously difficult because I didn't want to leave my friends at the time, but looking back, I'm so glad that that was my experience, because I think it taught me how big the world is. It's much more than where you grow up, or so I got to experience living in Zambia, and I went to a British boarding school in Zambia, so pour in another culture there. After high school, I moved to Australia to
Wait,
study law.
so did you finish high school in Zambia?
I did. Yeah, I
Oh,
did.
okay. And where in the
Yeah.
US did you grow up?
So I grew up in a small town called Morgantown, West Virginia,
Ah,
and it's a
okay.
university town. And then, yeah, so my parents were studying there, and that's where I grew up. And then I moved to Zambia, and I went to high school in Zambia, and then finished high school in Zambia. And then I went to Australia for undergrad.
Yeah. So tell us
Yeah.
about that. Wow. So why did you pick Australia from Zambia?
This was I wish I had found you like 20 years ago. So at the time at the time I was finishing high school, and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I thought I had a broad idea that maybe I wanted to do business, and I thought, okay, I'll do like an MBA or something. But growing up in America with immigrant parents, we had the option of one of you has to be a lawyer and one of you has to be a doctor. So my whole life, I kind of grew up with this idea that I guess I'm going to be a lawyer, and then I'll do an MBA later. So I was, in high school, I got good grades, and I was on the right path to going to law school, and everything was aligned, but I just didn't have the right connection to it. So I did go to Australia to do law, and I did 3 years of law school, and then had a crisis of conscience and realized that if you want to do law, I think you have to be committed and connected to it, because otherwise you'll just end up an ambulance chaser. And you really have to have that passion to sustain it, and that it wasn't me. So I
I want to stick
swapped.
there because so many immigrant parents want the best for their kids. And we all
Hmm.
grew up in the generation of lawyer, doctor, engineer, and if all else
Hmm.
fails, banker. Those are right.
Yeah.
And I really want to talk to college kids and parents and say, if we can have an intervention that early where we have a personality psychometric based career path, there's a lot more
Hmm.
joy in that journey and a lot more success when you're connected and love the path that you're on. Because the way the world is
Exactly.
changing now, it's about building things and building yourself, and you have to have that interest to have the longevity in
Yeah.
the space to make the biggest.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So you had that
So I
crisis.
discovered it the hard way.
What happened?
So I went for 3 years of law school, and then let's say there was a situation, not going to name names, but I had a roommate at the time who basically copied my assignment and handed it in at the same time. And so we both got in trouble for plagiarism.
Wow.
And it was so frustrating, because on that piece of paper, you were supposed to pretend to be a solicitor. And I had written on the paper Daura Associates, which is my last name. So obviously, I'm like, that's your evidence. That is my paper. But they decided to fail us both. And the course, I know, we had to retake the course for an additional year. So it was a year-long course, which was going to add one more year to my degree. And I couldn't do it. I was like,
Wow.
no, I can't. That was my exit. I was like, I can't do this. I can't commit any more time to this thing that I don't love. So I had to shift course, and I decided to go back to the States to finish my undergrad. And I ended up swapping to business, and then I decided to do marketing because I was really interested in the sort of human element, like the decisions that people make and why, why consumers behave in certain ways. So I thought, okay, let me try marketing, just get a degree. I can do something with it right down the line. So so I swapped to that, and then I worked for a little bit in that, but I started off in sales and in the retail industry, and it was fine, but it wasn't quite what I was looking for. It didn't have that like the right people element to it. So then I decided to take I did another degree. So I went and did a master's.
So
And that
when
yeah.
you came back, where did you finish your undergrad?
So I ended up going back to West Virginia.
Okay.
So yeah, I kind of took it as an opportunity to go back because at the time I really missed the States. So I was like, let me just go back and feel
And
better about that.
what school?
So I went to WVU,
Oh,
West Virginia University.
all right.
So I finished there. Yeah.
And then
And then
your master's. Where did you do your master's?
so I did a master's at Valparaiso University.
Okay.
And I did it in international policy and commerce, which is like international economics and international policy. And that was really interesting. But we really, at the time, we were really, really focused on US-China relations. And for me, I wanted a much more international perspective.
Yeah.
So I thought to myself, if I want to get a really international perspective, I think I need to study outside of the States. So I ended up stopping that, and then I moved to Sweden. I found a program in Sweden. So
Hmm.
that's how I ended up in Europe.
Interesting.
So yeah.
Okay, so that's an interesting story because, you don't get a lot of success stories in parents' minds, right? In the minds of parents,
Hmm.
I think
Hmm.
have to start something and finish it, and that's how you're a success. But you
Yeah.
actually started, stopped, started something new, finished that, and then got your master's in something else. So you were experimenting throughout this time. So how do you think
Yeah.
that experimentation kind of benefited you?
I think one thing, it's given me so many different experiences and so many different knowledge bases, right? So I think if I look at my job now, right, I walk into it and I have points of reference for so many different areas because I've been experienced in so many different ways, right? So I've been in so many different industries. I worked in an NGO. I worked in retail before. I worked at the UN. We'll get to that. I worked in corporate, and now I'm back in retail, but with the social impact side of it, right? So in a way, like all of those different touch points has given me really unique experiences that I can draw on in my work today.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
Yeah.
so you ended up in Sweden. You finished your master's in what
Hmm.
specifically?
So I did international marketing and brand management.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
And then what happened next?
And then I was between a job in Stockholm or a job in Copenhagen. And I really liked Copenhagen. I had been across from Sweden during my studies a lot because it's very close by and very international city. And I ended up getting a job and an apartment all in the same week, which is unheard of in the Copenhagen market. So I think the universe again aligned right for me because I haven't left. I've been here for 8 years now. So after that moment, I stayed and just built my life from here.
Yeah, and you got married and
Yeah.
you had a baby and so on. So how does
Hmm.
the UN factor? Did you work for the UN from Copenhagen? How does that factor in?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So while I was here in Copenhagen, I got an opportunity. I actually I was looking for a job where I wanted to use my marketing communications, but I also wanted to do something positive for the world. So during the time that I was back in the States doing my master's, right after my master's, I worked for an NGO for a little while, and I liked that. But it was, very small scale and, very dependent on donor funding, which similar to the UN, but I wanted to get back to that a little bit. And so I found this posting for a job as a communications assistant. and it was in an organization that was working for sexual and reproductive health rights, which was really, really interesting to me because, it has a really big impact on women and larger communities they're from, right? So I found this post, and the deadline had gone. It was like a month old. And I saved it on my computer. I was like, that would have been perfect for me. And then 2 months later, a friend of mine sent me a job post. She was like, I think this would be good for you. And I looked at it and I was like, that's the same job that I had saved. And I almost dismissed it. I was like, well, that's done. But what they did was they reposted it. They reopened the posting. So they were still looking for somebody. So I applied for that, and then I got that job, which again was perfect.
Yeah.
So that's how I got into the UN. And I worked there for a few years, and I really loved it. I loved all of my colleagues. It's such a great group of people who really, really want to do good things in the world. And I really love that. But as much as I love the UN, I found myself getting a little bit frustrated with the speed with which we were able to do things. And maybe that's the entrepreneur in me who wants to like create and do things, So I got a little bit frustrated there, and I thought to myself, okay, I had experience in the NGO world, and now I've done the UN. I'm very, like sort of liberal, left leaning. Maybe I need to get some experience in the corporate world, see how they do things, and move things quickly, right? So I decided to step out of the UN and go into the corporate world, which was good for me in that I learned a lot. Again, building on my experience in different fields, but it also taught me that there needs to be an element of social impact to the work that I do.
Yeah, I'm just
Mhm.
looking back at your LinkedIn profile now. So you knew very early on from your global experience, you lived all over the world, you knew that you wanted to be in the impact space straight out of school, basically. But in the impact space, as you mentioned, it can be bureaucratic, it can be
Mhm.
slow moving, it can be political, dependent on governments,
Mhm.
interventions. And so you wanted to taste the corporate world to see what that was like. And in the corporate world, you realize no, you really need a mission, you really need an impact. Because the psychometrics, the personality always shows, in my opinion. You can compensate for some aspects of your psychometrics with training and with effort, but over the long term, over time, pieces of you will always try to emerge. The real you will always try to emerge. And so my
Mhm.
philosophy is you need to acknowledge and honor the real you from the beginning, and really generate momentum in that path. And that's where the rewards, the financial rewards are. Because can I even say that you're well compensated in your role right now? And that's so
It
important.
Yeah, it worked out well for me, and you're absolutely right. Even during my stint in corporate world, one of the things that I did was I helped to implement one of the company's first sustainability initiatives. So we were, working towards fighting plastic pollution, and that really energized me. Like getting to do that kind of work, and I realized that I need to do this in my everyday. So I need more of this. So yeah, that was another driving force, and I think that was like my inner self really coming out, even in that scenario.
Exactly. So, my advice to people who are thinking about their soul careers is always to go back to your true self. What is it always called towards? And really honor that and go for it, and stop trying to suppress parts of you, because doing that you suppress your revenue, your earning potential, in my opinion. Okay, so we heard about the good parts of the story and some bad parts with that plagiarism. Wow, that was, yeah, no, that's really traumatic to go through something like that so young. So, what would you say, apart from that story, what are the biggest challenges that you faced in your career, and how did you overcome them?
Um, that's a really interesting question, and I think I've faced different challenges at different periods, and I'm trying to think what's the biggest one. It's always a challenge to be, like to be an outsider coming in, right? So like I'm an immigrant in this country, right? And the immigrant experience is it's got its own challenges in terms of just entering the labor force, right? So at points I've been very lucky, and like jobs have kind of worked out very quickly. But after my first job in Copenhagen, it took me about 8 months to get another job, even though I had the experience, and I think that's I think one of the ways that I've been able to overcome it is like the persistence that I have, and also knowing that I've experienced so many different things. It's like, okay, this is a phase. This is what's happening right now. It's not going to be forever. Um, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Yeah.
Well, that's a tough thing that I want to discuss a little bit. When
Mhm,
you are looking for work for more than 4 months, and the
mhm,
toll that that takes on your emotions, that search
mhm,
can be very, very difficult. And I read this book called The Year of Living Danishly because at the time the book was written, Denmark was the happiest place on earth. And a big
mhm.
part of that is they have a very strong social safety net. So you
Yeah.
do get an income even when you're searching for a job. But even with
Mhm,
that social safety net, it can be
mhm.
challenging. So, what was the most challenging part of that time for you, would you say? Because I'm sure a lot of people coming out of the pandemic are going through that right now.
Yeah, it's really tough, and I am very privileged and very lucky because I do live in Denmark, and there are social safety nets. So I was lucky enough that I had unemployment insurance. So during the time that I was unemployed, I had some income coming in from the unemployment insurance. It wasn't enough to cover everything, but it covered the basics, right? So that was very lucky. But I'm somebody who, despite my entrepreneurial tendencies and the way I've moved around a bit, I do, crave some financial stability, right? And that can be very, very stressful for a lot of people. And so, like, knowing that I was always just a little bit short on being able to, like, cover the bills and stuff. And then the added pressure of, I have a small child at the same time. And then you start judging yourself. It's like, okay, was I being very selfish and stepping away from, a job just because it didn't really feed my soul? But at the same time, I realized that I'm not going to be my best self if I'm ever working in this situation every day. So I had to sort of take away that judgment from myself in terms of looking at, was I being irresponsible to walk away when I have a small child? And it's obviously worked out now. Things are really great, but I think for a lot of people in facing this sort of uncertainty in the pandemic, I think the most important thing that you can do is, yes, it's tough, but the best thing that you can do is like figure out for yourself what's the thing that's going to drive you, what gives you energy in your everyday life. Because once you get that, and you will, if you're going with your own drive and what's important to you, then you'll be so much better off than just sort of like accepting anything just because it's there.
Exactly. And what I really glean from what you've said is that career is identity for a lot of people.
Hmm.
That career journey, and I see it in all of my clients, it is about who you are, your self belief, what you think your value is, what you think your worth is, and it's all about identity. And so, my clients that come to Soul Career, it's not about tactics. Like the tactics are a small piece of it, maybe 20% of it. It is about the person more than anything else, and that search for meaning in their work because we spend most of our lives at work. And what you
Yeah.
did, going through this search during a very difficult time in world history. I remember that when the George Floyd protest came up, that you had to take a break from the search and just self-care during the
Yeah.
search, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
emotion, managing the emotional part of the journey is such an under talked about piece of a career search. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it's self-care. It's so important. And like you said, yeah, I did have to take a break. I had to stop and, just really take care of myself. It was such a tough time. And I think that's really important for a lot of people, just to make sure that you're taking care of yourself, your health, and your mental well-being,
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
Absolutely. So important.
Yeah.
And that's actually what we push in the first couple of weeks of the program, because inevitably it becomes a very challenging journey. The persistence it takes to make it to round three in interviews, and then, another candidate was chosen and you have to start again. So we always recommend you have to be working the process at all times in that search, especially if it's taking a longer time, if you're an immigrant in another country, for example. And in
Hmm.
order to persist, you have to take care of yourself mentally,
Hmm.
emotionally, physically, so that you have that energy to keep going in the search.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay.
Yeah.
So, what tips do you have? Like, what three tips would you share with someone who has experimented a lot the way that you have and are now
Hmm.
trying to figure out, okay, what do I really want for myself? What is my soul career? What tips would you give them?
I think one thing is you really have to listen to yourself. Like, stop listening to outside voices telling you what you should do. I mean, I had my mom telling me I had to be a lawyer. I had like these different expectations, external expectations. I think first of all, you have to let go of those. And it's really easy when you've been hearing things over and over, or when you're looking at society, and you can really start to judge yourself or start to think that that's how you actually think. But I think the most important thing is to really, yourself. You have to listen to your body. I did this thing where during some of the exercises with you, we did these, like, where we would try and work against our beliefs, right? So, like, writing down something that's a false belief that you have about yourself, and then burn that, let it go. It's like a ritual, but it actually does do something, right? So letting go of those self-limiting beliefs is a really good step. And then really, really listening to yourself. I ask myself questions and listen, and try and listen to how my body feels about, is this what I should be doing? Is this what I want to be doing? So that's something that I've taken away from the course. So, like, really listen to yourself, because inevitably the answers inside. You know who you are, and you know what's important to you. It helps to get the guidance and clarity to sort of see that, but feel it out. You really have to feel it out and stop listening to outside voices.
Yeah.
um, I think another thing that's really important is, at least for me, the having the social impact. Find the thing that energizes you about your work. Like, find this something that you would do even if you weren't being paid. And I think finding that thing that you really love, when that aligns with, where you're going, you get the benefits. Like you said, you get the financial benefits, you get the energetic benefit, you get to really live your sort of like your best self, because you're really living in your truth of who you are and doing the work that's important. um and a third tip, I think what I would advise is also just look at things differently. Like some of the work that I did with you, looking at, okay, you might have this belief, and maybe it's tied to what I already said, but like this belief about what's possible for you. Expand that, because once you there are opportunities everywhere, if you really start to look and believe that you can open up doors. And I think that's another thing that I would advise people, which is a little bit fluffy and hard to say, but once you start doing the work, it becomes more tangible. I
Yeah,
would
no,
say.
that
Yeah.
search piece is the hardest piece for a lot of job seekers, because
Mhm.
um, the default is to search for things that you've always done and to feel a lot of guilt, like, oh, I'm not ready, or I'm not good enough, or I shouldn't look for that thing that I really want. I really should just stick to what I've done before. And so what you are
Absolutely.
saying is actually experiment in the search itself, test the waters, because everybody is always surprised by the opportunities that are out there once they give themselves permission to expand
Yes.
that search horizon.
Yeah, for sure.
So my last question for you, Marianne, is like, what happens from here? I mean, you've only been in this role for about 6 months, but
Mhm.
doing the work that you thought you would love and actually enjoying it, how do you see your career evolving? What happens next?
Well, I see I was just having this conversation about when I first joined, and I feel like I have landed in this company that is like I found my tribe.
Yeah.
Like I remember one of the first meetings that I walked into, we there was like a 10-minute meditation in a meeting on Zoom. And that's something that I had never taken into like my professional life, you know. I thought it was just something that you keep it in your private life, but like walking into that and realizing that these people value the same things that I do.
Yeah.
I don't see myself going anywhere. I'm gonna stick. I'm gonna stick with IKEA, um, because they really align with my values. And so far, I mean, obviously I love it. I mean, it's been a great start for me so far, but I want to see how this plays out. So I'm going to stick around for a while and grow in this role. And then it's a great big company, so there are going to be lots of opportunities. Most people I talk to have been here for many, many years, 12, 13, 20 years. So there's opportunities for growth and to do different things. And apparently I'm somebody who likes to experiment and try different things. So I think there are lots of great opportunities for me in that.
So interesting. So from your first consultation as, an entrepreneur, wanting to become an entrepreneur, to now becoming a company man. What a transformation, right? What about that entrepreneurial spirit? Are you going to have a side hustle? What are you thinking there? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that's going anywhere. I think I'm definitely going to have a side hustle. I'm working on a few things, but it's a little bit on the side. I still want to create an organization where I'm going to be able to help have some social impact. I really want to focus on women and create some economic opportunities for women in disadvantaged groups. So that's something that I'm trying to figure out the how and where, but yeah, we'll see. I'm sure something's going to come together.
Beautiful. And my takeaway from this, and this is what I say to a lot of clients and potential clients, that there's a lot of glamour right now around entrepreneurship and go start your own thing. And coming out of the pandemic, you need to have multiple streams of income and so on. And there are kernels of truth in that. But there is value in having a predictable income, in being part of a tribe of people that you connect with at work and you're all on a team working towards a mission. Entrepreneurship can
Mhm.
be very lonely. Entrepreneurship can lead to loss of income. It can lead to financial ruin. It definitely leads to unpredictable income streams. And then there's the mentorship and the growth opportunities that happen in a great company as well. So I have to say that there are, like, getting a corporate career path is not
Mhm.
necessarily a negative. Like, a 9 to 5 can be amazing if it's the right company too. So I
Yeah.
love that you've kind of brought that out in this conversation. You thought you were done with corporate life. You thought you wanted to be a full-time entrepreneur, but then you found a tribe and a company that had your values, and you see your future. You see many years with that company. Not a
Yeah.
story we hear enough these days.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, yeah, entrepreneurship is great and it's shiny, but yeah, there is something good about finding people that you can build something together with. So,
Absolutely. So, with that, thank you so much for being on the podcast, Mari-Anne. I love having clients on, and I hope that you have an amazing career with IKEA and with your entrepreneurial journey as well.
thank you so much.
If you love this episode, remember to hit subscribe and leave us a review. And if you're a professional, executive, or entrepreneur that's interested in taking one of our coaching programs, head on over to soulcareer.com and sign up for a free consultation. We would love to hear from you.